Welcome this evening to our continuing study of the parables of Jesus. You know, Jesus was a master of using the ordinary things of life and creation to teach us what it means to be his follower or his disciple. We saw this when I shared with you a few weeks ago about Jesus speaking of his disciples as salt. And just as salt in the ancient times was used as a preservative of meat and to keep it from spoiling or decay, so Jesus was saying that his disciples were to be that preservative in a culture of moral or ethical decay. And just as salt was a seasoner and added zest and taste to food, so as disciples, we are to add zest and vitality to life as followers of Jesus. Well, this evening, he uses another very ordinary image from life, and that image is light. Jesus says, Matthew 5:14 through 16, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Light was a well-known image used in the Old Testament, used of God in referring or speaking about God and his people. Genesis 1 begins with the declaration, or the first creative act, "Let there be light," and there was light. The light was in contrast to the chaotic darkness before creation. Later, light was used several different ways to refer to. One was God's presence, another was God's salvation, and then another was God's revelation. All of these, God's presence, his salvation, and revelation, were referred to as light. In Isaiah, God speaking to his people Israel, and speaking to and about the Messiah, he said this, "I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles." Isaiah 42:3. And then God later says in Isaiah 49:6, "It is too small a thing for you to be my servant to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring back those of Israel I have kept. I will also make you a light for the Gentiles, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth." All of this culminates in the breathtaking declaration of Jesus in the Gospel of John, where Jesus says, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Now, we come back to the statement in our parable about the light. And now Jesus, the one who says, "I am the light of the world," Jesus is now speaking to his disciples and to his followers. And it's to them that he says, "You are the light of the world." Why does Jesus use this image that he's used of himself? Why does he use it for his disciples? Ever since the fall of humankind that's recorded in Genesis chapter 3, the world has been in spiritual darkness to sin because of human rebellion against God, man and woman rebelling against God. And God set in motion a plan to restore a fallen creation. He began this plan in Genesis 12 with Abraham. And Abraham was called to be part of the people of God. God was going to raise up from Abraham a nation of people. And those people were to be those who would be a light to the other nations. And it would be through them that God would seek to restore all of the nations of the world. The light to dispel the darkness came from God to the people of Israel. Then the people of Israel were to be the light to the nations. But the people failed. When they failed, God sent his Son into the world as the light of all. And now God's Son was calling his disciples to be the light of the world when he was gone until he returned. And now we today are the light of the world until Jesus returns. Jesus then gave the examples of the importance of letting the light shine, the importance of the light, the light must shine in order for it to do any good. And he said, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. Israel has a lot of hills and towns and villages that are built in and around hillsides. At night, when the lights come on or the houses are lit, and Jesus would have been referring to this time, when the towns and the villages became lit up, then they were like a light on the hillside, giving light to all of those around and giving light to those who might be traveling in darkness and giving them the light, giving them direction. The second example that Jesus used was just a typical Palestinian home. The Palestinian home was dark, and it had maybe one window or maybe more than one, but it was dark, and the only light was the light from the clay oil lamps that the people used. And the oil lamps had to be lit and then placed up on a stand, because that's the light, that's the only light for the house. And the lights or the lamps had to be placed up on stands so that everybody in the house might benefit from the light. And this is what Jesus was speaking about. Nobody, he says, nobody lights a lamp and then puts a bowl or a covering over it. Jesus was simply saying the purpose of light is to dispel the darkness, to reveal things, to help us see things. And the only way that can take place is if that light is not hidden, but allowed to shine. At that point, Jesus then says to them, in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Now, some people have seen a contradiction between the passage I just read to you from Matthew 5 and Matthew 6, chapter 6, verse 1. Matthew 6:1 says, be careful not to do your acts of righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. Well, really, the two teachings do not contradict each other. They're not contradictory because each one speaks from a different motive or a different intent. We do not do good works in order to be seen by others, or we're not to do good works for the purpose of being seen by others. We simply do them because that's what followers of Jesus, that's what disciples of Jesus do. And so it's not to parade it before others. It's not so that we can catch everybody's attention. Jesus was simply saying, I want you to let your light shine. I want you to let your life shine so that when people see it and they see what happens in your life and they see the kind of person you are and they see the what you do and how you treat other people, from that they will glorify our Father who is in heaven. So Jesus is speaking about that for us to simply live the life of a disciple, and in so doing, the light, which is the works that we do, will shine forth, and God will be glorified. Paul speaks in a similar way about this when he's talking to the Ephesian Christians, and he's reminding them, for you were once full of darkness, but now you have the light of the Lord. So live as people of the light. That's what we're called to do. We were all living in darkness before Christ. But when we came to Christ, now we're living in the light. We're walking by the light, and the light is actually dwelling within us so that it might shine forth for other people to be able to see Jesus. An article in Leadership magazine some years ago told of 750 Muslims who were asked to fill out a questionnaire about how they came to faith in Christ. They were from 30 different countries and 50 different ethnic groups. And they represented every major region of Islam. They were asked to rank in importance the different influences that brought them to Christ. The number one influence that brought these Muslims to Christ was the lifestyle of Christians, or the light of Christ shining forth from the lives of Christians, followers of Jesus. They said things like, there was no gap between a person's profession and their practice. In other words, what the Christians said and what they did matched up, and that impressed them. They said that they treat, meaning Christians, they treat women as equals. That impressed this group of Muslims, these who came to faith in Christ. And they said they, meaning Christians, they love others rather than being unloving toward people who are different. Now, all of these things are light coming forth from believers. And as others saw these practices, they saw the light of Christ. And by these persons, these believers, just letting the light of Christ shine in their lives, this number, 750 Muslims, said that was the influence. That was the major influence that brought them to faith in Christ. That shows us today the power of letting the light of Christ shine in us and through us. I remember growing up seeing a old television show. I think it came on Sunday mornings, black and white TV show. It was a religious show. I didn't watch the whole show. I just remember that it was called The Christophers. And I just remember the intro. Every Sunday, the introduction would come on, and you'd hear this voice, and the voice would say, "It is better to light one small candle than to curse the darkness." This is what Jesus was teaching his disciples in the Sermon on the Mount. And it's what he's teaching his disciples, us, today. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. We'll see you again next week. God bless.